Today I'm going to talk about verse 4 of the 8 verses, which goes, "Whenever I meet a person of bad nature who is overwhelmed by negative energy and intense suffering, I will hold such a rare one dear, as if I had found a precious treasure." So we've probably all met people like that, or also on the internet, the news, the media, we hear about such people. And when we do encounter someone like that, what can happen is stuff can come up in our mind. Feelings of aversion, disgust, impatience, even hatred, criticalness, lots of critical thoughts, name calling. Does that ever happen to you? So, how does it feel when we have those kinds of thoughts and feelings in our mind? Does it feel good? And do we feel good about ourselves for having those kind of thoughts, kind of like proud of ourselves? Wow, that's great. I'm really glad my mind is thinking that way. So probably not. Probably doesn't feel very good. And this happens due to habit, having had this kind of experience so many times in the past, then our mind just goes on automatic and has those kind of thoughts and feelings. And if we're not careful, then it can almost be like a tsunami wave, and our mind is just carried along helplessly by all these negative thoughts and feelings, and that can last for a few minutes or maybe hours or even days or weeks. So it's not pleasant, and not only that, but as we know, it's negative. Yeah, that way of thinking, we're creating negative karma, we're creating the cause for suffering in the future. So it doesn't have to be like that. If we have learned mindfulness, then we can notice those thoughts and feelings, and with introspective awareness, that like sets off an alarm that says, this is bad stuff. I shouldn't let this be happening. And so if those two mental factors are operating in our mind, then we're able to have this awareness, no, this isn't good, this isn't right, I don't want to do this, and we can do something else instead. So in Buddhism, there's lots of antidotes to negative thoughts that we can apply. So we can apply those and reduce or even get rid of those negative thoughts and feelings and replace them with ones that are more positive, like compassion, forgiveness, kindness, understanding impermanence, understanding emptiness, and so on. So I think that's the reason the verse says that we can hold a person like that as dear and as like a precious treasure, because they give us the opportunity to work on our mind. When it comes to nice people, people who are really nice, who behave well, who have good attitudes and do good things, it's easier to feel kind and compassion. Even though, sometimes we get annoyed with them too, but, it's not as difficult to have good feelings towards people like that. But when it comes to someone like what's described in this verse, then it's really challenging to have positive attitudes rather than negative ones. So we have to work harder. So a person like that gives us the opportunity to recognize where we're at in our practice, how much of these positive qualities we have, compassion, love, and so forth, and how much we still have the negative qualities that we're trying to overcome, like aversion and impatience and so on. And so it's probably best to start with those who aren't too bad, who are just a little bit bad, a little bit negative. And then if we learn how to do this with them, learn how to transform our mind, transform our attitudes with people like that, then we can work on more difficult ones and eventually the really difficult ones. And I was thinking that probably the most difficult people would be those who cause suffering to us, who directly harm us rather than harming, strangers out there in the world. So someone who causes suffering to us or to people we care about, that's really difficult, really challenging. And I've come across some really inspiring stories of people who haven't even learned about Dharma and thought transformation, but have been able to extend forgiveness to people who've caused them incredible harm. Probably the most inspiring story I heard, it was in a documentary about forgiveness and reconciliation. There was a woman in Rwanda who was able to forgive the man who killed 5 of her children. 5 of her children were killed in this horrible massacre that happened, I don't know how many years ago. The Hutus and the Tutsis just slaughtered each other. And there was one incident, I think this may have been where her children were killed. There was some village somewhere, and a whole bunch of people took refuge in a church. They went into a church to try to avoid getting killed, but nevertheless, people came in and just killed everybody in the church. So I think that's where her children were killed. So this man came to her one day and he said, "I'm the one who killed your children, and I feel really sorry, and I want you to forgive me." And she just got angry and get out of here. But he kept coming back. I don't know how many times, but a number of times. I think he may have been in the same village or the same area. So he kept coming back and asking for forgiveness. And after a while, she started to realize he was sincere. He really did feel bad about what he had done. And he was suffering too. Clearly he was suffering. But she also realized that her anger, continuing to have anger towards this person wasn't doing her any good. That was just painful. And so gradually her mind softened towards him and she was able to forgive him. And I think they even became friends, and he would come and help her with things around her house, her farm, and so on. So I thought, wow, because I think that's probably the most painful thing that could happen, because, when children are threatened, parents will sometimes say, "No, don't kill my children, kill me instead." They would rather themselves be killed than have their children killed. And so to have your children killed by somebody and then be able to forgive that person, I think that must be the hardest thing. So there's stories like that. I've read other stories and so on, and I find it really inspiring because, well, if someone can forgive that person, if you can extend forgiveness in that kind of situation, then it's, wow. I should be able to forgive people who I find just a little bit annoying, So I really like this expression we have in English, soft heart, right? We talk about having a soft heart as opposed to having a hard heart. And I don't know about you, but I can feel that. I can feel it physically. When my heart is hard, it's kind of tight, and it's, you don't really feel good towards somebody about something that they're doing. And then at other times, your heart is soft, and it's soft and open, and you can feel kindness and forgiveness and so on. So for me, the feeling of soft-heartedness is so much nicer than the feeling of hard-heartedness. And also the way you treat people, or sentient beings, turkeys or whatever. When you have a soft heart, is so much nicer than when you have a hard heart. So you can check that for yourself. And if you can agree that having a soft heart is much more pleasant both for you and for others, then there are things you can do to bring about that kind of change. So one of the easiest ways is this saying that the Tibetan Lamas repeat again and again about how everybody wants to be happy and nobody wants to suffer. So when there's someone you're feeling hard-hearted towards, then you can think, well, that person is basically just like me. They want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. Let that sink in. And then check, do you think this person is happy right now? I mean, when people are, like what's described in this verse, doing negative things, full of intense suffering, they're not happy. They're suffering. And if you can understand that, that can help to soften your heart. Yeah. And then you can also ask yourself, well, if I was in that person's shoes, how would I want people to be towards me? What would be helpful for me? And then try to be that way towards that person. And I think you'll realize, yeah, you would want people to be understanding and kind and not insulting you or making you feel worse, right? So that's one contemplation that can help change our heart from being hard to soft. And another one is dependent arising. This is a little more intellectual. But yeah, thinking about how things depend on causes and conditions. So if a person is like that, behaving that way, having that kind of attitude, this is the result of so many different factors, causes and conditions coming from many different directions and over a long period of time. So all of those factors, causes and conditions, have affected the person and led them to be the way they are. And we don't have much choice or control over what kind of causes and conditions happen to us, right? They can come from past lives, from this life, our parents, our family, other experiences we have in our life, and so on. And of course, our own karma. But we don't have, this is what Shantideva talks about, and I find it really helpful. We don't really have choice or control over the causes and conditions that come to us and lead us to be the way we are. So that may take a little longer to think about and get a sense of, but I find that really helpful as well to change my mind and be more accepting and understanding and compassionate towards people, even when they're doing awful things. So whenever you find you're having that experience of being hard-hearted, and you realize that that's not a very nice way to be, and you'd like to have a more soft heart, like the way you feel when you're with a little kitten or a little puppy or a little child. It's kind of a nice feeling. So you'd like to feel more like that. Then there are things you can do. It takes a little bit of effort, but just bring these things to mind. And work on softening your heart. And I think that will be much nicer for you, and also nicer for others, nicer for the person you're dealing with.